All right. Today we're digging into something that many people overlook, even in the detox community, about how mold exposure and electromagnetic fields, or EMFs, can work together to deepen and prolong illness. This is mold and EMFs, a hidden synergy in toxicity. So, why are we revisiting mold? Because we did talk about it last week, or the last meeting, I'm sorry. Because many people continue to suffer long after remediation, detox, or even moving into a new home. They may be doing all the right things and still do not feel better. One overlooked piece of the puzzle is EMFs, or wireless radiation from our phones, Wi-Fi, and smart devices. And compelling research shows a correlation between mold growth and EMFs, and we're going to go through that today. So today we'll explore how EMFs don't just affect our cells, they may actually activate and aggravate mold toxicity. So Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, a well-known integrated physician and environmental medicine expert, shared a fascinating experiment conducted by a mold researcher in Switzerland. This researcher grew mold cultures in a Faraday cage, and I should have been clicking along here. He used a silver-coated fabric that shielded the cultures from the electromagnetic fields. He measured how much mycotoxins the molds produced in this protected environment. And then he removed the shielding and exposed the same mold cultures to common EMF sources like fluorescent lighting, computers, and ambient radiation from a nearby cell tower. Now, what he found was staggering, that mycotoxin production increased by more than 600 times. But not only did the molds produce more toxins, but they became significantly more potent and aggressive and more dangerously biologically. And Dr. Klinghardt explained that this is a natural biological response. Molds, Lyme spirochetes, and other pathogens sense EMFs as a threat, and they respond by ramping up both toxin output and reproduction, trying to protect themselves and ensure survival. He believes this is a key reason why people, especially pregnant women, can suddenly become overwhelmed with symptoms. The body isn't just dealing with infection or mold, it's reacting to an invisible stressor that makes these pathogens more toxic. The connection may help explain why detox efforts sometimes fail or why sometimes their symptoms intensify in modern environments. So let's briefly talk about EMFs. These are electromagnetic fields, and we're all exposed to them from Wi-Fi routers, Bluetooth devices, cell towers, and even the wiring in our walls. While they're considered non-ionizing, they still stress the body. They can increase oxidative stress, disrupt cell signaling, and suppress immune function. And if your body is already fighting mold, EMFs can tip you right over the edge. So just to review, mold makes us sick primarily through its toxins. Mycotoxins disrupt mitochondria, they hijack hormone systems, weaken our immune responses, and inflame the nervous system. They can live in our sinuses, gut, lungs, and silently poison us. Many of the symptoms of mold toxicity overlap with chronic fatigue syndrome, anxiety, and even autoimmune conditions. Now imagine this. Mold is present in your body or your environment, and it's producing low levels of toxins. But when EMFs are present, like Wi-Fi or cell signals, it starts pumping out more toxins. That in turn weakens your detox pathways, making you more reactive to EMFs. It becomes a loop. Mold toxins impair your immune system, and EMFs drive the mold harder. The result is a spiraling reactivity and chronic inflammation. This explains why some people never fully recover. Now, both mold and EMFs affect the limbic system in the brain. That's the part of our brain responsible for processing threats. When it's inflamed or dysregulated, people develop sensitivities to light, sound, smells, and even EMFs. This is a big piece of what we call electromagnetic hypersensitivity, or EHS, and I'll go so far as to say MCS. Many mold patients end up there if the cycle isn't interrupted. As Dr. Neil Nathan emphasizes, for many patients with mold and EMF-related illness, limbic system retraining is essential. It helps calm the overactive stress response and allows detox and other treatments to work more effectively. Programs like DNRS or the Gupta program can be life-changing tools for rewiring how the brain perceives threat and restoring balance to the body. So what does it feel like? People report brain fog, insomnia, unexplained fatigue, racing heart when near electronics, and anxiety in high-tech environments. These are signs of a body overwhelmed by both internal toxins and external stressors. If this sounds familiar to you or your clients, you may be looking at a combined case of mold and EMF toxicity. Another layer here is genetics, and we did talk about this the last meeting. The HLA-DR gene determines how your body processes and eliminates biotoxins. About 25% of the population has a variant that prevents proper detox of mold, and these individuals often report higher sensitivity to EMFs as well. This explains why some people in a moldy or high EMF environment crash while others don't. Now, we've created a lab test quiz to help you decide which lab test might be the best for your condition, and the link will be in the description of this video. So what does all of this mean in practical terms? First, you may still feel unwell even after your home has been remediated. That's because mold spores or toxins that remain in your body and are now supercharged by EMF exposure can continue to trigger symptoms long after the source appears to be gone. Second, EMFs in modern environments can keep mold toxicity active. Whether it's Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, smart meters, or your phone, these signals may stimulate mold and other microbes inside your body to continue releasing toxins, making it difficult to fully heal. Third, this means that mold detox efforts may stall or fail without addressing EMFs. Even the best detox protocols won't be enough if your environment is constantly re-triggering the problem. And finally, awareness and testing are critical for long-term recovery. Knowing what you're dealing with, whether it's lingering mold, EMF hypersensitivity, or both, helps you to take the right steps in the right order toward actual resolution. So here are some action steps you can take. So first, test your environment for mold. We recommend immunolytics, and the link will be for them will be in the description. Use binders and a proven detox protocol like detoxination. And don't ignore the EMFs. Turn off your router at night. Use Ethernet where possible, plug in with a cable, and measure your space with EMF meters. Sometimes even small changes can bring big relief. So if you're looking for more details on how to test for mold, both in your environment and in your body, as well as how we integrate that data into a detoxination program, we covered all that in our previous episode called Mold Toxicity and Testing: Is Mold Sabotaging Your Detox? In that session, I went deeper into the pros and cons of various mold tests, mycotoxin urine testing and when it's useful, how we interpret labs from a detox and not diagnostic perspective, and how mold can delay or derail your detox, and what to do about it. If you missed that episode, I encourage you to go watch it. The full video the link is in the description below. So it's a great companion to today's topic, and it'll help connect the dots even further if you're trying to figure out your next step. So with that, let's go ahead and open it up for Q&A, and I will stop sharing and we will see who else here today. Looks like we got a good group. I hope you all found that information to be somewhat compelling, and I was totally blown away when I saw the video, which, by the way, the Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt video that I was referencing will be linked also in the description of this video. The fact that the spores were growing at 600 times in the environment of EMFs versus under a Faraday cage was stunning. There's not a whole lot of graphics for that video. It looked like they were just pieced together, but the thing is that the study itself was remarkable, and I don't know if it was ever published, but I have seen other published studies, and I'll also try to link those in the description of the video once we post this. So would anybody like to unmute and go ahead and start asking some questions? Was that
Hi,
Paul?
Dan.
Hey, how you doing, sir?
I'm surviving. I got to get back in the sauna like real quick. Yeah, thanks for bringing up this topic.
Yeah, it was a good follow-up, and I don't recall who it was, but in the last episode, somebody mentioned it, and I thought, that is absolutely valid to present today, and so here we are.
Yeah, because I have wondered about this because I did see some things in the past, and I had like personal kind of experience. Like I was living at my mom's place for a couple of years, and there's a cell tower at the high school because she's like really close to it. Within maybe like an eighth of a mile or maybe even closer. But
Hmm.
I was doing worse there, and I noticed like I was getting kind of strange, but I was getting pains in my hand, and I was using like a wireless mouse. And I kind of put things together because I took a class before from like um the Pottinger Foundation, and I remember David Getoff, he's a naturopath. I think he was talking about um this stuff with EMFs. And anyways, I kind of dug deeper, and then I started using a wire mouse, and guess what? It went away. And then I went deeper, and I bought like one of these acousticom meters, and I was testing, and it was like super high signal. And so
Are you
yeah,
exposed to mold?
yeah, I might have been, because that house later on I found out like a leak in like the tile roof, and plus like maybe the outside there was like water sprinklers, and I think it used to broadcast water on the stucco. But if you keep doing that, and you just have, the stucco gets wet, and then you got the 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 paper under it, that eventually it's probably gonna, mold out, because I've seen it,
Sure.
doing. So yeah, I totally think I get those kind of symptoms where it's brain fog, and maybe even kind of like tingling, and
Hmm.
high, it's all over the microwave stuff.
Yeah, and if you don't remediate mold and it's affecting your body, you are just essentially in a vicious spiral, like I mentioned earlier. Yeah, so thanks for the input, though.
So I would assume too, when they talk about mold, would you include like different candida species? I'm sure
Well,
aspergillus and stachybotrys and
I can tell you that we know that other pathogens are also affected the same way mold is. So the test that researcher did was specifically on mold, but it is pretty much known now that the other pathogens react the same way. It's a fight or flight. They're basically in survival mode. So they start pumping out more toxins and reproduce faster. And that's really where we're seeing the bigger problem. So people who are doing our detox program who aren't getting where they need to be may have an issue that they didn't even know about with a mold. So it's definitely worth looking into and testing. And Immunolytics is the company that I recommend for testing your home. And again, the link will be in the description for that. But uh, I would just recommend that if people are struggling, even though they should be doing it, or they think they're doing everything they need to be doing, there's probably more to the picture than they realized.
it wasn't. Then one last question: wasn't there another doctor? I want to say maybe he was from the Texas area, who kind of reminded me like what your dad did, but he was dealing
Dr.
with.
William Ray.
Yeah, that's him.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, he was a colleague. And in fact, there's several people in Texas who are colleagues of ours. The people who are focused on MCS and tilt. So Claudia Miller, for example, she's another one that is a colleague that my father worked with, or consulted with. They basically passed information back and forth on all these different things. But yeah, now that my father's retired, I've reconnected with Claudia, and I don't know if we're going to take it anywhere. But it was nice to reconnect with her because it'd been many years since I'd had any contact with her. All
Thank you
right.
so
Well,
much.
anybody else have a question? Somebody's asking in the chat here, do I have a good recommendation for an EMF meter? The Tri-Field meter is the tried and trusted unit. They do make a digital version, but I like the analog myself. So the Tri-Field meters are something that you can find on Amazon or whatever. All right,
Hi,
so anybody else?
Daniel. It's Holly. I was the one that sneaked in the last question on the last call. I'm so
The one
glad.
the one who suggested this episode, right?
Yeah, I'm so happy that you're doing this. So I um I've been looking more into, like the newer cars these days, and they're
Mhm.
basically like smart cars. And um, unfortunately, I have a new car, and obviously I can't get out of having this new car. It's a lease car, and I'm just thinking, how much am I exposing myself to these constant EMFs? And I've looked into things like Blue Shield. There's a brand called Blue Shield that does kind of like these devices that you can put in the car, and it would mitigate EMFs. And yeah, I just want to, like, it'd be great to know like your thoughts on that, because I think last time I spoke to you, I was speaking about I'm leaving the city to go and live somewhere rural. I'm here now, praise God. So, there's not even 5G available where I live right now, which is amazing. But I'm just aware that I will be getting exposed every time I go into my car. So yeah, I would love to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the Blue Shield little box thing, and in all honesty, I've not ever tested any of these devices. But when I've watched other people's reviews of things like this, I kind of concur that, or with them, that they don't make a whole lot of sense about how they work. So I don't yet have any recommendations for any kind of products that might help mitigate EMFs, but the only thing that we do know works is Faraday cages and possibly even Faraday blankets. So you might want to consider that, although I don't know how practical that would be while you're trying to drive that car to have a Faraday blanket over you. But the Faraday cages are definitely things that we do know will mitigate EMFs, and that's why I don't trust these other boxes like the Blue Shield or these pendants that you wear and things like that. It's like, how in the world can they possibly protect? And I could be wrong. I just haven't had any real, tests done or have experimented with them myself.
Hmm. Thanks. If I
Yes.
just don't, sorry, I was just thinking then to ask you real quick, if you don't mind, um, have you looked at like a link between tinnitus, mold, and EMFs?
Not that particular link, but tinnitus is something that we see associated with heavy metal toxicity, especially gadolinium from MRIs. So it would not surprise me that mold is one of the many triggers, because there are many triggers to tinnitus. They are, in fact, there's genetic reasons why. There's, all kinds of things like infections, but it wouldn't surprise me if there is a link there.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, I'm Nate.
Hi,
I'm a
Nate.
building biologist. I measure EMFs for a living for my business. So I know
Beautiful.
a fair,
Thank you for joining us.
yeah, absolutely. Not trying to brag, but I know a fair amount about the topic. Definitely more than the layperson.
Well,
And
we appreciate experts joining us for this. So yes, I am an expert in detox, and this was a great topic. Holly mentioned it when when I discussed mold in the last one. So please we're welcome to let us know what you know.
awesome, awesome. Yeah, no, I appreciate. I haven't done your program yet, but I've read your book, and I'm really excited to give it a try. I'm dealing with some really bad gut issues. I think I have a stomach ulcer
Okay.
that the doctors just misdiagnosed. I've had an endoscopy, and I don't know. Anyways, I'm drinking a bunch of cabbage juice. It's really helping, and
Good.
so I'm trying to get rid of this burning in my gut, and then I'm gonna do the detoxination program. But I'm definitely gonna, it's all about becoming more resilient. So EMFs, these man-made forces, we got to differentiate between the natural stuff, the Schumann resonance, the Earth's
Mm-hmm.
magnetic field. These are
Mm-hmm.
good for us. They've been with
Right.
us since the creation of the world. But all this man-made stuff hasn't, and it's at the very least a low-level stressor on your body if you can feel it or not. So it definitely affects sleep. That's where it definitely affects me the most. Like, I can feel vast differences in the quality of my sleep just based on basically the EMF environment. Of course, I have my home, very mitigated, but just I'm dealing with most people calling me are very sick. So I don't get into the health conversations too much, but sometimes I do. And, when we get on that topic, it's like, hey, I can't solve all your problems, but I see time and time again, I know one of the other people on the call mentioned tinnitus. Yeah, people will be hearing frequencies more, feeling vibrations in their body oftentimes. I traveled up to North Dakota for an assessment on this super rural property out in western North Dakota and out in the oil fields out there. But I mentioned its location because she had better EMF levels than most people, but she was still super, super sick. But they lived in a moldy house. They discovered mold in their house before. So it's everything you were saying in the presentation, I just, saw in real life with this EMF client. And she was so sensitive to so many frequencies. And even didn't do well in her super rural location home. But yeah, the mold is just such a killer. So it's like you said, it screws up every system, and then you become sensitive to more things. But whether you can feel the EMF or not, it's still doing, like I said, at least a low level stressor. I think of, the smart meters outside my house, and we had to shield our bedroom from it. And that thing's going off every 8 seconds. It's ridiculous. Why
Right.
do they need it to pulse every 8 seconds? So that's all night long too. So it's like a little biological poke. Your body's trying to go into a deep sleep, but it's definitely
Well, I can
affecting.
tell you why, because they are using their signals to pass information, down the neighborhood to a central location. So they're basically repeaters.
Yep, the smart grid for sure.
Yeah, smart grid, right. And going back to something you were saying earlier about how mold is, I would say, actually, you didn't say this, but underrated as far as most people's concerns with toxicity. Everybody focuses on heavy metals. They don't realize that the man-made chemicals can be as toxic. Glyphosate, for example, is very, very toxic to the body. And then you got molds too. And so all these different types of toxicities are things that people need to be thinking of, not just hyper-focused on one area. But the
Yes.
good news is the detoxination can deal with all of them. So that's the good news is our sauna detoxification using niacin handles all of those different types of toxins. And in fact, we don't have evidence to prove this, but even the forever chemicals we believe are being actually detoxed. The reason that there's a difference there between the forever chemicals and most other chemicals is because most other chemicals are going to be lipophilic, or they're going to be fat attracted or fat soluble. Whereas the forever chemicals like the PFASs are actually binding to proteins. And even though that's the case, our protocol, I focus so much on these lipophilic toxicants because of rebound lipolysis. But I realized recently that I underplay how important this program is at getting rid of the other things, even water-soluble toxins like glyphosate, which does store in fat cells, and Dr. Harold Zelliger will explain how that works. But also gadolinium is water soluble, and it does store in fat. And so the thing is that I do focus on these lipophilic or fat soluble or fat stored toxins, but this protocol deals with pretty much anything the liver can't. And that's an important distinction. Do you have more to talk about when it comes to meters, though? I'm curious to know, Nate.
Sure, yeah. I can
So
pull
do
up
you have a recommendation for the audience?
I can pull out a PowerPoint presentation if you want. No.
We may actually have you on the podcast. Keep in touch with me. I got a podcast that I would love to have you on if you want to do a presentation like that.
Awesome. No, yeah, I'd be happy to. That would be fun.
Yes, the Get Detoxinated podcast, relatively new, but we've been focused more on galvanism and how metals can break down in the body and become ion metals or metal ions that can be stored in fat and things like that. But anyway, yeah, I'd love to see your presentation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I'm of course want people, my service, my trade is people calling me up. I come with my big bags of equipment, meter upon meter, because there's different pros and cons and strengths and weaknesses. And
Mhm.
of course, I'm doing this for a living, so I have very high quality gear. That's the advantage of hiring a professional. But you can get various meters. You mentioned the tri-field. I say that's kind of like the bare minimum
Mhm.
So that is, I definitely do not recommend anything less than the tri-field. So, there's $30 Eric Hill meters or these meters on Amazon that, Lord knows where they come from, some no-name brands and just super cheap. They're junk. So you
Yep.
don't want to get all this stuff's invisible. So it's like you can't, even doing this professionally, I have an estimate. I can measure the magnetic flux density from the power lines and do all these calculations. But, in an environment, you got all these wireless towers around you. There's so many different sources in our modern environment. So
Right.
basically, my point is there's not one piece of equipment that does everything super good. So,
Good point.
you could get uh, I dream about this stuff, but I don't even have, some of this stuff costs like $35,000 for a meter, and then you have to buy an antenna that costs $10,000.
Yeah.
It's just insanely expensive, but extremely, extremely accurate. So that's on the, of course, nowhere near the consumer side of things,
What's
but
your business span? Where is your range?
yeah, I'm located in Minnesota, just kind of a suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul here, and I'll travel through the whole lower 48 if you'll pay me a travel fee. But generally, most of my business is right in Minnesota and Wisconsin and the Midwest here. Within a day's drive, essentially. But I'll go to North and South Dakota. I went to Iowa, Omaha, so on and so forth. So. Um,
Well, I'll tell you
I'll
what, if you want to put your contact info in the link, like an email address or something, I'd be more than happy to share that in the description of the video. So,
Thanks, Dan. I really appreciate that. That's
yeah, my
great.
pleasure.
Like Nate, I started learning and then just got sidetracked with it, but I started learning a lot about dirty electricity. And so I did never get into getting the fancy meters that were picking up EMFs and things. But what I found was that here in California, where I live, that the dirty electricity is a real issue. And
Mhm.
I'm far from an expert, but I've sold a few hundred units that 100% of the people have improved health after they get them by removing by cleaning up the sine wave. It also saves them money on their power bill. We've done before and after comparisons year over year on their power bills, and it actually saves money on their electric bill as well. You were asking about the hocus pocus of the different type of plug-in modules and things. We looked at dozens of different models. I've actually sold some that were actually installed at airports and all kinds of things because they do save you money on your power bill. But the one that we settled on was actually derived from NASA technology. The engineers that put it together were actually using NASA technology that came out of the Apollo era, and it's really fascinating on what it does and how it can clean the power. The big thing that I noticed is when I first put one in at my house, just to try to get an example of whether it was working, anecdotal. I turned it on and off without telling my wife for about 2 months, just random. So it was different days, different things. And she clearly slept better when the device was on than when it was off. And so that was my anecdotal experiment on knowing that the dirty electricity is a real thing.
Fascinating. Well, thanks for that input, Ken. Anybody else want to unmute?
I can share
Purely
my
so.
I
Go
can
ahead,
share
Eric.
my anecdotes as well. Thanks, Dan, for putting this on.
You're welcome.
I recently dove into EMF and EMI stuff in the last 6 months and taken like basic steps, but I'm in Brooklyn and New York City, so it's kind of impossible to escape. But I've hardwired my internet, put the Wi-Fi on a timer so it's off at night, which changed my sleep quality like immediately. To Ken's point about dirty electricity, I powered down the breaker box for 2 weekends in a row. Woke up with bedhead of a child, like the deepest sleep in years. Um, and also have a couple static EMI filters now. Um, and got some mitigation tech for the router and my cell phone and doing what I can, but it's kind of impossible. I guess if I were to ask a question, it'd be like, with all the new builds and trying to find mold-free housing. Um, but then people are always building smart homes. How do you marry both, trying to get both things right and trying to get a mold-free new build without a smart meter or some technology in the house that's putting off EMF?
Nate, you want to hit that one?
It's tricky. Yeah, I mean, that's essentially my business, and I don't know how many of you have heard of the Building Biology Institute, but that's where I got the foundation of my training, and then I've gotten a lot of extra training outside from mentors, electrical engineers, and so on and so forth. But yeah, the building biology, we focus on air quality and EMF mainly, and then new builds. So that's kind of the three certifications you can get, and anyways, it's those all matter. And so, yeah, it is really hard. You can get professionals involved. I do pre-purchase assessment testing. I just did a job the other day. That was my last job. And then I had a couple, I talked myself out of the job, but they were going to move into a house right below power lines. And I said, I'm going to come out here and I'm going to measure and I'm going to tell you it's way too high and it's way too close. um, but anyways, just going back to, you can invest in your own meters. So learning how to use them, that's the best economical long-term thing if you're looking for a place to live. But yeah, the mold is a hard component because it can be hidden. And I did take the air quality training, but I don't advertise myself as an air quality professional. I've done my professional focus on EMFs mainly. But anyways, yeah, you could get professionals involved. There's Dan, you probably know some. I didn't watch your whole presentation the other day about mold, so I don't know what you talked about with, but you can get home tests, but just there again, realize the pros and cons of these things. They're not perfectly accurate. I did a drop test, just a petri dish, said our house was super clean. But we found hidden mold in our basement. So we have a full basement in Minnesota and live in a 1963 house. And it's like, the foundation wasn't sealed well and we had poor drainage around the house. We had a gutter fall off in the backyard and there was just water draining down the side of the house. And all of a sudden our storage room in the basement has, moldy cardboard boxes. Well, come to find out there's mold all the way along the trim hidden behind and then on the sheetrock too, like around the whole perimeter of the room. So that was hidden mold, and you just kind of got to understand something about buildings too. So it's tricky as far as you got to get some education yourself or get some professionals involved is kind of the bullet point takeaway I would answer that. But you just never know what you're getting. And I do new build consults too. So there's lots of consultants out there that can help guide you if you don't want to, do your own research and then just bounce some ideas. I think it's well worth the small fees that we charge, in my opinion. But at least you can have a good foundation to start out with and save some money, get a second opinion. And I think the more knowledgeable people, confirming, hey, this is a good idea or bad idea, I think it's easier to make decisions.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So anybody else want to, it looks like somebody new just joined us, but all you have to do is unmute and throw your question out there.
I had another one for Nate. I was wondering about like all these Starlink satellites. They're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands, and the broadcast. I wonder how far the broadcasting, at ground level is. And for Dan, I was wondering about your friend Nina Silva. She would probably be interesting about all the frequencies.
Right. I mean, she's the expert in rife frequencies. So yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. That's another person that would be good to have on the podcast, don't you think?
Yeah, she's smart.
Oh, yes, very much so.
Very wise.
And a very good editor.
Very good. Yeah.
If you don't know, she edited my book and wrote the foreword to it. And I'll tell you, it's kind of a funny story here. I'd submitted at that time probably around 200 pages of the book that I had ready to go. And she sent back 197 pages needed some corrections on it. And boy, that was reminiscent of school for me. But I'll tell you what, thanks to her, that book came out much better than I ever could have imagined. So, but yes, she's an author herself. She wrote the tome that's the Rife Frequency Handbook of Holistic Healing. And also, I may have it here. Yes, I do. She has this particular book, which is the
Yeah,
Holistic
that's a good book. I
the
have it.
holistic handbook, yes, of sauna
Great.
therapy, which there's at least 16 pages where we're referenced. So anyway, yes, Dr. Nina Silver would be a good guest to have on the podcast, I think. Thanks for bringing her up.
Yeah.
So anybody else want to chime in?
So Dan, you made a statement. Basically, the detox. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, and nobody on here is gonna, oh, the FDA and Kier and all these things, but you're kind of saying detoxination's an all-in-one package. Like you're detoxing mold at the same time, you're detoxing, what we think is these PFAS chemicals, the forever chemicals, that you're talking about, and that's just going to make you more resilient to just all these modern stressors. Is that an accurate statement, basically?
Thank you for bringing that up, because in the earlier podcasts, the Detoxination podcast or Get Detoxinated podcast, I had Dr. Scott Schroeder on the call. And one of the things that well, he was on 2 episodes actually, but one of the things that we pointed out in that episode, or those episodes, was the fact that there's a tipping point where people have so much body burden that they go over the edge, if you will, and that's where the MCS, or multiple chemical sensitivities, or the EHS, electro hypersensitivity, things like that, start to really affect them negatively and gravely, because that point is so overwhelming to the body that all the systems are basically shutting down as far as being able to appropriately respond to it. But if you do the detoxination protocol, and I'm not just talking about once, this is something that we know from studies, you need to consider doing it 2 to 3 times, simply because all the studies show a body burden reduction of 1/3. But if you do the protocol and make it part of your lifestyle, then what you find is that you keep that tipping point from hitting. So you've reduced the burden to the point where these things aren't affecting you anymore, at least not as badly as they can. And they are actually, or your body is starting to be able to recover from other conditions as well, because we have seen things that we would not normally think are being detoxed, but they're not being detoxed. Things like mold, or excuse me, Lyme, Candida, SIBO, and things like that, where you have these opportunistic pathogens that are taking over, if you will. They've defeated the immune system. So when you detox the body, you're basically taking away the things that keep them alive, like heavy metals. They feed off of heavy metals in a lot of cases, or the fact that the body's immune response becomes better regulated, and therefore it can fight back. So this is why doing a detoxination protocol multiple times over the course of maybe a year or 2 really does make a huge difference. And we were reversing the mold mycotoxin problem many, many years ago. We knew the protocol was dealing with those because mold mycotoxins are lipophilic. They store in fat. And so that's one of the main things that this program is really good for. But again, any toxin that the liver is not able to process is probably able to be detoxed with this protocol. I wish we had the controlled environment to be able to do more of the studies, but my father's retired, so that's kind of out of the question now. But if I had the ability to do more studies, I would certainly be doing that. As you probably know, I do everything from home now, so I'm working with clients remotely, helping them through the detox program with remote detox coaching. But if I could do studies, I would love to be able to do a ton. There's so many different chemicals and metals, and I would love to see the forever chemicals, as part of a study. So, but yeah, we are broad spectrum to steal from Monsanto. So yes, this program has been clinically validated to be the most effective detox program ever created. And of course, we didn't develop it, but we perfected it. And it's an ongoing process. There's always something new that I learned. And even though we knew mold mycotoxins were something that we were detoxing, I personally wasn't so heavily involved with the mold side of the issue. And over the course of the last year or two, I started to really pay more attention to the people who are presenting with mold toxicities and connecting more dots. And that's how we basically came to the point today where we're having this conversation. So thank you for the question.
I shared a graphic in the chat that is exactly what you're talking about, and I'm giving Dr. William Ray credit because it's what you're talking about. It's just the body burden. It's just a visual exactly of the conversation.
I'm going to have to download that and see if I can do a screen share of it so that the people who are watching this video would be able to see it. Let me bring it up real quick. So.
Yeah. I don't want to take over the call, Dan, too. It's your deal, but I could talk about the Starlink thing for a second.
It sure looked like there weren't very many questions, so we'll just roll with this one. Does everybody see that? There we go. Okay, stop share. Yeah, I will present that as a image in front of us. So anyway, thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome. Thank you for sharing all that, too.
Yes. In fact, how are we doing on time? We got about another 15 minutes to call it an hour. Does anybody want to include any other questions? Because again, any topic you want to talk about.
I mean, I could ask about the frequency medicine stuff you guys just briefly commented on. I'd be interested in reading that book. I did some GB4000 and Doug Coyle frequency medicine like 3 weeks ago, and I had one of the most profound responses to anything I've tried for Lyme disease and mold toxicity in my life.
Really?
I had the best day in like 18 months the next day from a fatigue brain fog standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested to hear more, Dan, if
well, again, from my perspective, Dr. Nina Silver is the expert that I lean on with this type of issue, because I never was trained in any way, shape, or form for frequency healing. I have seen amazing things done with frequencies. And at one point, I was so hopeful that we would find some kind of bioresonance machine that would be able to actually show pre and post detox body burden reductions. Unfortunately, nothing has proven itself. They can show what the body's dealing with, but that's about it. So, and other things like urine and stool tests, blood tests can show that as well. So, but as far as body burden reductions, they have to be at this point fat biopsies, which are ludicrously expensive. So not for the public.
But you do measure it prior with something from a bioresonance standpoint?
Well, you can certainly use those to see what the body's dealing with. Yeah. Anyway, the thing is that we are electric. We operate off electricity. And I've had in the back of my mind a hypothesis that these heavy metals and any kind of, well, it's usually the heavy metals that are able to short circuit our signaling. And even the metal plates and screws and things like that, there's good evidence that they're affecting how our body communicates. So it's something that people need to really pay more attention to. Fortunately, as you'll see in the part 2 of the Get Detoxinated podcast, we do talk about types of implants, like the screws and certain plates and things like that, or clamps that are non-metal, that even there's some that can actually transform in the body into bone. So as they degrade after their usefulness of their purpose is over, that they actually resolve into bone, which is very, very fascinating. So again, that's the part 2 of the Dr. Scott Schroeder Get Detoxinated podcast. Before we get done with the call today, anybody want to chime in with another question? Because we're getting close to the hour here. All right.
If no one else is, I was going to ask you about that the zeolite.
Okay.
Sometimes what was that the one that you just started using?
Zeolite Pure is the brand that I'm happy to promote, because I got to meet Micah Portney, the owner, who is the pioneer of using clinoptilolite, zeolite for detox. and the green screen is probably giving us a lot of grief. But anyway, the thing is that that zeolite, I now that I've met him and talked with him at length. In fact, he's going to be on the Get Detoxinated podcast here in the near future. But after I started talking with him and getting to understand better, the different myths and different flat out lies about zeolite, things that I thought I even knew were correct, I found were wrong. Things like don't use metal. That was something that the Hyaltrophin brand has right on their label. Don't use metal, but Micah Portney uses a metal spoon, and he says it doesn't affect the zeolite. So, constant learning. But did you actually have a specific question about that zeolite pure?
Yeah, because I had some from a long time ago that I bought, but I was wondering, like, taking it sometimes after a sauna use, if you kind of feel worse, or sometimes like I would have more like frequent urination, and I'm thinking that's maybe it's clearing stuff. But one of my questions is that sometimes, like, I thought you were saying that he was recommending 3 teaspoons. Maybe I wasn't taking enough.
Well, if you're using the spoon or the scoop that's included with the product, you're definitely not getting enough. I'm glad you brought that up, because whenever I get the opportunity to talk about this, I'm going to. So this little tiny teaspoon scoop, which I don't even think is a full teaspoon, to be honest, this is what Micah Portney had to include in the product in order to get FDA approval. So he had to basically relent to their demands that he had to basically dose it at this tiny little level. Whereas when you talk to him, like I have, he recommends 3 tablespoons of the product per day. And when you're on our protocol, we go for 5 tablespoons of this product per day. And that scoop, I tell people who are clients of mine, if you buy this product, throw away the scoop. It's literally ridiculous. But that was the only way he was going to get FDA approval. So.
So 5 tablespoons. Wow. Okay. So that's a lot more than, I think I only took like a teaspoon.
Yeah. If you don't take enough of zeolite, you do have the risk of making things feel worse. If you have more zeolite, you're better off. There is no known upper limit to zeolite. And in fact, this company, ZeoCharge, for example, the owner, Jeff Hoyt, he and I met on a Zoom call, and I was reaching out to him because he had one of the best articles on how to properly dose zeolite that I've ever seen. So I reached out to him and I asked him, do you know if there's a too much high limit? Is there too much you can take in one day? And he told me that he took a full tub, which is 150 grams, or what was it, 5.29? Yeah, 5.29 ounces. He took a whole tub every day for 10 days straight. And, of course, he spaced it out over the course of a day, but it's perfectly safe to take that kind of high dose of zeolite, and very healthy too.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining me again today. And this will be recorded, as you already know, but uploaded to the Get Detoxinated YouTube channel. And I will be sending an email out to everybody to let them know it. But I hope you all learned something. And again, I always appreciate when you join me. So have a good rest. Yes, thank you. And have a good rest of your day. I'm going to stop the recording.